People have been literally been minimized down to a swipe left or swipe right in terms of their value at this point in this society. When we're not meant to be this way.
Yeah, and it sucks. All right. Hey, Paul. My name's also Paul as well. I think we're going to make White Paul and Black Paul. That's how
Ebony and Ivory.
Yeah, exactly. So that works pretty good. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Paul.
Well, I'm old. I'm old. I have 3 daughters. I was rode hard, put away wet. So, most people that follow me or know who I am through either social media or online usually know me through the writing I've done for everybody from Elite FTS to Muscle and Fitness to Testosterone Nation to Bodybuilding.com to Flex Magazine, whatever. So basically during the past 8 years, I think I've written for just about every major fitness publication that there is.
Nice. That's pretty cool. What got you into the whole fitness part?
That's the story. There's 2 stories I have to tell on every podcast that I go in. There's number one, how you got started lifting, and then the other one was basically how you got either discovered or to wherever you were in the fitness industry. The first story was when I was 14 years old. My parents had divorced. My best friend had just gotten killed. I was in a really bad place in my life. I dropped out of school. Mm-hmm. So that was a pretty rough time for my teenage years. And I've been playing music since I was like 8 years old. I played the drums. I pawned my drum set and got a Greyhound bus ticket, and rode from North Mississippi all the way out to Oregon, which took 4 days when I was 14 years old, which is crazy to think back on now. Like I would never, I have a 13-year-old daughter. There's no way in hell I put her on a bus for 4 days, right?
Yeah.
So I rode a bus for 4 days. I got out to Oregon. I spent the summer out there and learning martial arts under this guy named Rob Askew, and I lived with his mom and dad out there. They were really well off in this big house, giant house. I think it was like, I don't know, 5 stories or whatever. And Rob, though, got me into lifting from like day one, from the day that I got there. And I absolutely hated it. I hated it. We would go to the gym and we would train in the morning, and then we'd go eat lunch and come back and train after lunch. It was the dumbest to this day, and I've been training 30-something years. It was the dumbest split I've ever done. I've done some dumb stuff. My first one was the dumbest. So we do like chest in the morning after breakfast, which he was really big on drinking a lot of orange juice. To this day, like I don't know why.
Vitamin C, probably.
Well, they equate orange juice with like being healthy, and just he was big on drinking a lot. So we drink a lot of orange juice, go to the gym, we do a body part for an hour, go eat lunch, come back to another body part for an hour. Just the dumbest split. So it was basically the Arnold split, if I remember correctly. It was like chest in the morning, have lunch, come back and do back. The next day would be like shoulders in the morning, then arms after lunch, and then like legs, and then more, like probably more chest after. Anyway, and then I was doing martial arts anywhere from 6 to 8 hours a day. So I was as sore. If you remember your first week or two of training really hard, how sore you were, it's like that debilitating soreness where you can't really walk or move, function. And I was sore like that, but I was getting kicked and beat on all day long. So it was pretty terrible. And eventually I acclimated to that, and I noticed the changes that were happening in my body pretty fast. And I got addicted. I was like, I like what's going on here. So I was like, I think I'm going to do this lifting weights thing for a long time. Yeah. So that was pretty much when I was 14. I've never stopped since then. And I'm 45 now.
That's so funny, because that's kind of how I started off. For me, it was mainly like, so I tell this all the time. I was actually born in Africa, West Africa. So moving down here, it was just me, my mom, and we were just kind of just like whatever. So being raised by a single mom was very difficult. It was extremely difficult. So a lot of stress at the time. So I started lifting just to kind of relieve some of that stress. And eventually I started doing it more and more and more frequently, and then got into playing sports. And then over time, it's just like the stress is sort of gone now. It's like I don't even stress about anything anymore. And I wonder if that's the exact same thing for you.
Uh, I've I've had talks with a lot of guys about that over the years, and whenever my life was stressful, my training sucked.
Mm,
And it's always been that way. I've gotten better at stress management as I've gotten older. When I was younger, I was a big worrier. I worried a lot.
mm,
I would stay up at nights worrying about stuff, and I came to the realization that worry really just robs you of your strength.
yeah,
And yeah, it changes nothing. I had that fight with my ex-girlfriend one time. She was like, "But I'm worried." I'm like, "But what are you gonna? Why are you worried? It's like midnight, and you're upset and worried." I'm like, "You can't fix anything. Just go to bed."
yeah,
And she was like, "Anybody would be worried about it." I'm like, "No, not me, because I would know I can't fix it or change it right now, and just go to bed and wake up in the morning and figure out what was my best course of action to either change that, or if I can't change it, then there's no point in worrying about it." But I didn't find. I don't think that lifting was like an outlet for me to reduce stress. I found more like the opposite, that it was an outlet for me to feel better, simply just feel better about myself. Because
mhm,
at that age, with all the various things that I had endured and gone through and that kind of stuff, I have a sister who is a drug addict, and spent my teenage years basically trying to save her from herself. And then just a multitude of other things that were happening during all those years. And for me, it was more like it was something that gave me positive feedback and affirmation, because the harder that you work in the gym, the better your results come.
mm,
And so if that, especially when I was young, all I really wanted to do, what made me finally feel good about myself again, was beating rep PRs, getting bigger and stronger and growing, and I felt like I was in control of that. I could go and I could manipulate my diet, or I could train a certain way, or, if you train really hard, you gave a lot of effort in the gym, you were going to grow. And I think that that's probably something that's missing from a lot of guys' frustration that they have now is, when I was growing up in those early years, that was during the early 90s, there wasn't a whole bunch of back and forth scientific debate about stuff. It was the entire mantra, especially through that decade, because Dorian Yates was
hard.
king at that time. Yeah, was that you train really hard, and the
Mhm,
harder you train, the bigger and stronger you're going to get, and that's what everybody just did. So the harder I did all sorts of crazy, wild, high intensity techniques and stuff like that, and learned from it, grew from it. And that was the thing. Like I said, when you see the results happening, especially as fast as I did in those young ages, I was 98 pounds when I was 14. And by the time I was 18, I was over 220.
yeah.
So that's just 4 years. And a lot of people were like, well, that maybe, I don't know if it was because I had decent genetics, or because I was just so driven and focused during those years that this is what I want. I want to get really big and really strong. That was the only focus that I had in my life at that time.
Mm,
And so it came to fruition.
mm. That makes sense. Back to my story. When I was younger, that was kind of the only thing that I did too. I think I started in like 2008 to 2010, where the whole scientific community wasn't like around at that time. It was just like you go through like a forum board, you kind of read up what's going on, and then you just go out there, you work out as hard as you can, create like your log and stuff like that to keep track of your progress. And there wasn't really like, hey, it's 5 days a week, 4 days a week, unless you just go and just do it. And I think in today, that is what, like you said, a lot of people are missing, because there's just so many different camps of what to do and what not to do. And then people tend to get like a little bit like skewed away, rather than just like the simple goal is to just train hard, eat based on how you want to get bigger or want to lose weight and such, and then just be consistent with that with enough rest. It's literally that simple.
Yeah,
I think.
there's a massive degree of paralysis by analysis across the board. And what I would when I see these guys that are suffering from that, usually their physique, and I don't feel like I'm being a jerk when I say that, their physique is usually a pretty good representation of that confusion. And that is they're not overly developed. They're kind of falling into that, hey, I've been lifting a little bit or whatever. But it's simply because they are confused. They're not confident in any of the modalities that they're choosing, right? So they don't ever really stick with one because they end up reading somewhere else that, well, this is subpar and this new study that came out says this or whatever. And so then they don't ever really ascribe to a typical any type of training ideology that they're consistent with week in and week out, and simply just focus on. When I put up, I think I wrote that article for T Nation about the 8-12-8 is just double progression, and people were so baffled and just blown away. And that was something I literally figured out on my own. I was like, I'm going to take a weight that limits me to about 8 reps, and I'm going to stay with that weight till I can get 12. And when I can get 12,
that's so funny.
I'm telling you, that was just something I figured out on my own when I was like 15 years old. Like after like a year or two of training. And I wrote an article about that because I'm like, guys are so confused about simple, just progressing at a very basic level. And people were just like, what? And there were so many questions that you would think that would be super straightforward.
Yeah.
Take away, you can do 8 reps with to failure.
Mm-hmm.
Where you can do 12 reps with that, work towards where you can get 12 reps with it, right? And then just increase the load in the next workout. And there were you would think that would be the most straightforward answer you could give somebody. And when I wrote that, there was thousands of questions. And I'm like, how can you guys have thousands of questions about a training modality so simple? I came up with it in my mid-teenage years. And you guys are baffled by this. And they're like, well, how many sets? I was like, I just did one. So if I was doing incline dumbbell press, it was 1 set. And then my next chest exercise would be like, flat bench press would be 1 set. And that was across the board. That was just the way that I did it. And there was just so many questions. I'm like, how can you guys have this many questions? Like I would come up with these things, say, hey, I know that if I do this and I get to where I knew that if I was, okay, well, if I go from squatting, 315 for 8 to 405 for 12, in my head, I was like, I'm going to have bigger legs. That was a really simple thing that I came to the conclusion of at a very young age. And you know what? That's exactly how it works.
Yeah, like that is literally, it's like, I actually wanted to make a video on this about how people forget the basics, but then just go straight to the complicated things. Like, for example, instead of like training the way that you mentioned, they're just going to be like, how many frequencies should I do? How many sets? How many reps? And how many all this other stuff. But then they've never really learned the basic, which is so simple and so easy to do, that they just skip over everything. And then they end up kind of just like going back and forth in like this little pattern here, and they never like make any progress because they're not consistent. And I'm not going to say the scientific community is to blame for that, but I will say, for example, like there was, I don't know if you remember this, but just a couple of years ago, it was that, okay, so you got to train each muscle group twice a week. And now there was a meta-analysis that came out. I don't remember when, how many months ago or whatever, that said, hey, basically if your volume is equated for, frequency is kind of irrelevant. So training a muscle group 1 time a week or twice a week, if the volume is equated through the week, there's not really any difference. But then people they were still hung up on, well, you got to train the muscle group twice a week. And it was like, well, you got to spike muscle protein synthesis this many times a week. And I'm like, guys, you are making this so difficult. Go in, train a muscle group when it's recovered again. Me and John Meadows, we had that talk. And I'm like, why are people so confused about that? Just wait until you feel like the muscle's recovered and then go in and blast it again. And you just keep repeating that procedure, recover enough between days that your nervous system has time to recuperate too, but just give enough days between training sessions that you have recovery at a peripheral level. So these things are, to me, when I look at them, I have to remind myself, okay, but I've been doing this for over 30 years and I've read literally tens of thousands of hours worth of material. It's been, I don't know how many hours discussing it with other people. But to me, all of this is still comes back and is very, very simple. When you're in the beginner to intermediate and high-level intermediate stages, you're going to be consistently focused on progressive overload. And then when you get to become a really advanced guy, you're advanced. There comes a point where you're not chasing pounds on the bar anymore, but then what I consider just chasing, consistently fatiguing the muscle fibers as maximally as possible. Mm-hmm. So you're still going to grow if you're doing that, even if you necessarily don't have progressive overload, because you're not going to be as strong. You're not going to be at your peak strength forever. You start losing fast twitch muscle fiber in your late 20s. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to always be as strong,
your peak strength. That's going to usually come in your late 20s to mid 30s. Some guys have hit, big stuff in their late 30s, early 30s, but you can continue to grow even without progressive overload happening, just through continuously fatiguing the muscle fibers, and then those fibers having to be rebuilt over and over and over again.
Exactly. Back to the concept of progressive overload. What do you think about intensity being the main driver for progression versus simply just focusing on progressive overload?
What's that now?
Like, what do you think about intensity? I believe, in my opinion, that intensity is the main driver for growth.
Yes. Well,
if you're applying intensity, you're also applying a certain sort of progression to help you build up on that intensity. But like, let's say you're not going to failure or training close to failure or any of that sort, you're not really creating that intensity to stimulate the muscle to be able to have.
Right. And that's more of the word that I'm looking for, is like, you have to in order to stimulate, to kick off the entire process for the growth stimulus to have happened, then you have to be training either to failure or like right at failure. The further away that you get from failure, the less stimulating reps you're going to be performing in a set. So if you're performing maximally to failure in a set, then you will have achieved the maximum amount of effective repetitions that go towards creating that growth stimulus, right? So the further away that you get from failure, the less repetitions that are performed in that set that goes towards creating that stimulus for growth. So in essence, you could say, yes, that effort, like what I call perceived intensity, not relative intensity being the loading on the bar, but perceived intensity, which is effort, it'd come back to, that's a very kind of rudimentary way of explaining that is going to be your main driver for stimulating the hypertrophy process.
Gotcha. That's definitely very understandable. What did you learn most of your information when you were younger, aside from the ones that you were training with?
Dude, I had a subscription to every muscle magazine on the planet. If there was a muscle magazine that was in print, I had a subscription to it. So Muscle and Fitness, Flex, Muscular Development, Muscle Mag. Let's see, there was Muscle Media 2000, Iron Man. If there was one, I got it. So I was getting, I think it would be anywhere from like 6 to 8 magazines every month, and I would just read them cover to cover nonstop. And if there was a book, every time I went to the bookstore, if there was a book, I bought that book. I would read it from front to back. Just every bit of information that I could get in that time. So I spent those years, my teenage years, essentially self-educating that entire time.
Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting. When you were younger, I started off that exact same way, but like as I got older, I drifted away from, because magazines, they stopped selling them as much. They're not promoting as they used to back in the day. So I kind of like steered away from that and more focused on like online information. So
once the internet was invented, that opened up a whole, just like you mentioned earlier, like message boards. A lot of guys that never got into the years of message boards, there was a lot of great information exchange that went on in message boards, especially if you found yourself on the right message board with a lot of really smart people. So I was on Intense Muscle on those boards back in the day, and that would have been around, that was a long time ago. That would have been late 90s through like the mid 2000s. And the guys that were running that was Dante Trudell of Dog Crap Training.
Skip, if I recall.
Skip was over there. Shelby was over there. Meadows was over there. I'm trying to think who all was over there. There was just a multitude of smart dudes, like, what I consider like meathead smart, like bro level smart. I don't know if you know who Alan Aragon is. Me and Alan are really close.
Yeah, actually, he's scheduled in for June for one of these.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so
so
Alan and I, we're really close, and we like to give people academia scores or bro scores. So like if you're like a bro level, like he loves like Chris Aceto's stuff. Like he considers like Chris Aceto's like a high bro level guy, right? Like really smart. He gets great, results from his clients. Like everything that he does might not be like spot on, like backed by like, 20 peer reviewed research papers, but the fact is the guy just gets it done with his clients, and he does know what he's doing. So we call that like high level bro guys.
Yeah, that's funny. So when you started lifting, you started what, like 90? What was your weight?
When I started lifting, I was 98 pounds.
Uh-huh. What sort of difference did that make when you slowly progressed and you got bigger and bigger? What were people's perspective of you?
Yeah, that's funny because I was gone for that summer, right? So I was like 98 pounds when I left home, and I had hair literally down to my waist. And because I was playing music, I thought I was going to grow up and be like a famous rock musician. And when I got home, I was over the summer I went from 98 to 117. Now 117 is still skinny as shit, right? But when you left, you were 98, and you come back and you're 20 pounds heavier. That's still pretty dramatic, especially when you consider the percentages at that weight, right? So that's a pretty big percentage of that weight. What is that? That's 20%, right? Give or take 20%. So I came back 20% bigger than when I left. And so I remember like my sister was like, holy crap. She's like, you're huge. And I remember it's so funny. She's like, thought I was huge. I was 117 pounds. But in comparison to the little to the thermometer that had left 3 months before that, yeah, I was much bigger. And that was definitely something that fed my sense of kind of like giving, we all go through, especially during those teenage years, different levels and layers of insecurity that we battle and struggle with and things like that. And a lot of it, guys go through the same thing with like this degree of insecurity that they feel about how they look, about being attracted to females. And I don't think that gets talked about a lot by men or males very much either, that we go through those struggles too, right? Like how, men are very visually driven, and one of the things that we forget is that women are actually very emotionally driven. But the fact is, we tend to still project that belief that if we're jacked and we're buff and we're this, that women are going to find us incredibly attractive, when the case is there's plenty of incredibly beautiful women out there dating really ugly dudes, because that ugly dude knows how to make her feel really good as a woman. So, but it doesn't change the fact that once you start getting jacked as a dude, a huge part of that is because you want that attention and that attraction from females. And the other thing is that you want the admiration of your peers too, right? That's a huge part of it. So when we're struggling with what we look like at that age, we tend to be fearful, insecure. We tend to kind of hide ourselves away, or like within the crowd. And then that exterior that makes us feel much better about who we are is because you can see you get that respect from your peers, because your guys are like respect you. You're big, you're jacked, you're strong, whatever. And then you kind of rise in that pecking order, and that gives you a lot of self-confidence. And I mean, sure enough, like by the time that I think I was 15, I gained weight really fast. So by the time I was almost 16 years old, I was actually dating the prettiest girl in the town we lived in. And that was, that was probably part of it. And then later, the girl that I ended up marrying, she only took a date with me. I fixed up a blind date with her because the guy that fixed us up told her that I was a bodybuilder. So the reason she said yes going on the date was because of that. So I think a lot of guys go into the gym when you're a teenager, when you first get started, because of those inferiority feelings, the way that you feel about yourself, the way that you look. And you like I said, you want to be respected and admired by your peers, and you want to feel like that women are attracted to you. That's a huge part of just feeling like that you have that strong sense of identity as a male, right? We attach a lot of that ability to either like fight or quote unquote be alpha and get the woman that you want, have the beautiful woman, and the other thing is be respected, or potentially even be able to like quote unquote dominate your enemies. A lot of that is very primal thinking that we have never shed from our ancestors and warrior ethos and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think that stuff is, I think most of us who find the gym and find that outlet and gravitate towards that, I think a lot of that is intertwined with those particular beliefs.
But do you think at a certain point in your lifting career, or just for how long somebody has lifted, do you think the idea of them just being like more masculine and totally just being like more attractive to the opposite sex, do you think that eventually fades away when you have a much better goal in mind that is more about longevity than anything else? So like, for example, for me, I actually did not start lifting because of girls, but it is a byproduct of lifting.
Right. And then the problem is later is that every guy starts asking you how to get jacked, and you realize what you were really going to get was a lot of attention from men.
Yeah, exactly. That's usually what it comes down to, like later in life. But when I started, it was mainly just to like kind of have like a positive reinforcement on what my life is and be able to take control of that and be able to kind of like use lifting as a way to move me forward towards whatever goals that I have. I still have this exact same mentality today where lifting is basically, it's weird to say, but it's what drives me to move forward in life and become the better version of myself. But I never did it for girls. But everyone every stranger that I come across always assume that, hey, you work out just so you can get attention from girls. I mean, at a certain point when I was younger, that was a thing. But as I got older, it was just like, I'm not going to lift for 10 years just to get a girl's attention anymore. It kind of just goes away gradually. Do you feel like that happened to you as well as you got older?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily say, I think definitely in my teenage years when I was lifting, being able to get attention from females was probably a small part of it. It can be a bigger part based on what other guys were struggling with, right?
Yeah.
It can be a myriad of things. But I think that we end up lifting and end up gravitating towards that to some degree because we feel like there's something missing in our life, like that lifting is giving us that fulfillment in some way, shape, or form. Right? That's why we do it. So it's whatever it's giving back to us, there's something that's been missing that is fulfilling and filling up whatever hole that it is we have in our life. So for some guy, if it's attention from females, or if it's just that he feels like he's big enough and strong enough to not be bullied or any of that kind of stuff, then I think that it fills those particular holes. And I think all depending on the individual and what it is that he finds kind of some own personal healing in his life, those things tend to subside as you have personal growth in your life. So if you take somebody that feels like that they were never, somebody made them feel like they weren't worth, love, or they weren't worth affection, or they weren't worth attention, or any of those kind of things, and they really they take that particular self-belief and they shove it down and they keep it with them, they'll go through the rest of their life believing that no matter what it is they accomplish, no matter how strong they get or jacked they get or whatever they do in business or whatever, they will have this underlying belief in their life that they are not worth any of those things, and they'll end up recreating some of those patterns and scenarios throughout their relationships for their life. So what I'm getting to with that is the way you end up shedding some of those particular insecurities is getting back and challenging those particular beliefs that you hold. So you're like, what made me feel like I'm not worth, love? And what is it that made me feel like I'm not worth, say, a commitment? What is it made me feel like I'm not worth being faithful to? What truth am I not living in? How am I betraying myself every day? And once I think a guy, and it applies to females too, but, just talking I don't think men have a lot of open conversations about this.
They don't. But I think that's the weird thing. And that's also something I wanted to talk about as well, because I've seen some of your posts, and you do post things that are very like, I wouldn't say they're relationship advice, but they're just more life advices that they can be applied to anyone. And it's things like that that are not usually talked about, because as men, when we do talk about stuff like that, about like, again, go back to the concept of being like an alpha male. I think there's a lot of misconception with that. It's not about who's the biggest, strongest guy in the room. It's more about who's able to provide support and be assertive as a man and never back down on what his words are in terms of like relationship with a woman. Because if a guy who's truly like masculine and secure in who they are, they will always be respected, because in their core, that's who they are as a person. But you do get the fake alphas and fake betas.
Well, and I'm not like a huge fan of the terms, but I understand the connotation of them, a whole alpha. And what I would consider like the fake alphas are actually really the betas. They're the guys that have to put on the chest puffing and the false bravado about how
Mhm.
tough they are, how strong they are, or whatever that this are. And they have to do that because deep down, they don't feel very secure in who they are. Like I said, it comes back to there's some wound or injury that exists in
Mhm.
their life emotionally that happened at a young age where they were made to feel lesser by
Mhm.
someone, right? They were
Yeah.
made to feel small or insignificant or inferior in some kind of way. So they end up growing through the rest of their life fighting against that. You know, what it is that you resist will persist. So whatever emotion that it is that you won't connect to and just allow yourself to feel and sit in for a while, that
Mhm.
will grow and grow and grow and manifest itself in worse and worse and worse ways. So
Mhm.
if you feel like somebody made you feel at a young age like that you were inferior or you were small or you were insignificant or any of those kind of things, as you grow into an adult, you still have that lingering subconscious self-belief about yourself.
Mhm.
And
It's
it's not until you can tap into that and figure out, okay, who made me feel this way? Why do I keep telling myself this story about it? This is who I am,
Mhm.
right? So that's the story you keep waking up to and repeating. And like you said, it's not just like romantic relationships, but it's friendships and it's, you know, the relationships you have with your family and things like that. And that's that sort of dysfunction that you keep living and repeating from a pattern perspective in your life until you can kind of, and I have those too, you know, like
Mhm.
I just had an issue with somebody that I love and care about very much. And some things came up, just fearful things that came up out of me and caused me to work in a really dysfunctional kind of way. And I'm having now to live with the fallout from that. And those feel like setbacks.
Mhm.
And because you end up suffering some loss in those times, but they also, if you use them properly, can give you pause for thought and say, you know, why does this pattern, why does this fear keep showing up in my life? Why does this particular fear of, you know, this person is going to leave me or abandon me, or this person is going to lie to me or cheat on me? Where does those beliefs come from? Where do those fears come from? And are they real? You know, you have to challenge the things that you feel. Say, okay, is this real? This feeling that I'm feeling, is it real? And
Mhm.
if it is it 100%, am I 100% sure that it's real? Because when you start asking yourself those questions and really challenging yourself, then you can kind of start changing your story. Because unless you're willing to get in there deep and say, challenge yourself, you know, from an introspective standpoint, and say, here's who I am, right? Here's who I am. I am this person, and you take all the derogative, negatory things that you end up repeating about yourself sometimes, right, when you're really low,
Yeah.
right? And so you can challenge that story, right? You will end up repeating those patterns. And but you have to be honest and live in your truth about that kind of stuff. Because when you hear this stuff about like loving yourself, it comes back to how you're talking to yourself,
Mhm.
right? If you had a friend that came to you and let's say they were going through like a breakup and they felt crappy about themselves and all what happened, you wouldn't tell them, wow, you're really weak, you suck, nobody's going to love you like this, blah blah. You would never say that, right?
Mhm. I
But
would.
you were right. You never would. You would be supportive and show your friend love and kindness and consideration in that moment of their pain.
Mhm.
But we have a really bad habit of saying those kind of things to ourselves when we're hurting. I'm pathetic. Nobody loves me. Nobody's going to be there for me. People are just going to keep lying to me. I'm not worth being told the truth to. These are the stories that we tell ourselves. You would never say those things to your friend across from you that's hurting in a situation, but
Mhm.
you'll say those things to yourself when you're hurting.
It's like the idea of being able to give really good advice to people, but you can't take your own advice in a sense.
You can't even tell yourself these things and
Yeah.
feel believable about them when you're in pain.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly. I've actually, I think I actually did end up coming to a realization where I do realize that I had some of those issues as myself
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like relationship patterns. Like, I'm a very loving, caring individual. So I tend to like project that feeling towards whoever I'm with, but sometimes it becomes to a point where it's like over caring, over caring, over whatever it is. And I care so much for the individual that I don't necessarily have that time to think back to myself as a person and try to apply that exact same concept to myself, like the exact same concept of like caring more for myself, showing that I love myself a lot more and all that stuff. But I projected that so much towards that person that eventually they do become to a point where there's like they kind of get annoyed with it because it's not that it's a fake feeling, but it's more of just like I don't know how to put it in words.
You're trying to teach this other person how you want to be loved.
Yes. And they can never learn that because that's not how they've raised themselves to love others, in a sense.
Right. We show love. We're usually in a position where we're trying to teach another person. We're showing them what we understand is what love is, right?
Yeah.
So because that's how we understand love. So we communicate that through our words, through our actions, through our beliefs, through our reactions and all that kind of stuff. So we're consistently teaching this other person how we actually want them to love us. So for you, it sounds like a big part of yours is, for example, like your love language would be like acts of service. You're probably a person you like to buy flowers for your lady, and you like to. No.
I feel like that's corny.
Then it's words of affirmation. Do you like to tell the other person how much you love them and how much you admire them and all that kind of stuff?
No.
Okay, so then what's the smothering part that you feel like you're giving?
The smothering part is being able to treat it in the same way that I would treat them. So like, I don't just go out and just get flowers because, I have to shower her with flowers all the time. But if I were to do that, I would expect some sort of like a way for them to show that. It doesn't have to necessarily be them buying flowers or whatever. It's just they have to show it in a way. I guess you could say it's more of just like assurance, per se. Like, I'm more of like honesty, respect, and love. That's literally the three things I ask for. And just someone being able.
Right. I think that's what most people at the baseline consistently say they want. But then you have to ask, are you consistently giving those things to yourself first?
That's where I came from, where I was just like, I'm showing all these feelings to these individuals, but then I'm actually not giving myself those particular feelings that I'm showing to others, which in a sense, I'm trying to project away.
So you feel needy when you're doing that?
Let me think about that for a second. Yes. I would say it would be more of like a needy thing to do if I were to do all that. But I think for me, the one big thing that I generally care about is just people being able to follow their actions, their words with their actions. And that's all I do.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I just wrote about that a little bit ago. It's like, words matter, actions matter, and what matters the most is that they both consistently line up with each other. Because a lot of times you'll hear people say, well, don't pay attention to words, pay attention to actions. But that's bullshit. What we say matters too. What we say matters too. What we do matters, and what we say matters. So our actions and our words matter. But the most important thing is that they're consistently congruent. So it's like somebody could look at the way we behave, the way we act, and the way we react, and then they look at the way we talk and say, yeah, those things line up really well. Yeah. It's when you're finding that those things don't line up well, is that people tend to have trouble trusting you, right? Because they're like, well, he says one thing and does another, or he does one thing that's right. So it's important for us to have integrity with ourselves in the sense that we consistently make our actions and our words match as much as possible.
And we also have to be able to recognize the fact that like those people who are with also have to be held to that exact same accountability, where if they say something and it doesn't match up, it's just like, this is not right. And it goes back to like how you would like to be treated. If you know that's not the way that you're being treated and their actions and words don't match, you either have two options: to stay and eventually fix it out, or get away and then try to work on yourself and see what about you that you need to change, to where you have to find someone that's just being able to equally give you that exact same love and affection, and shows that words and actions do match and they're very congruent as well.
Right. And that comes back to being able to, like, when you're with somebody, being able to express your needs. Hey, here's the things that I need. And hey, here's my boundaries. Like, if you do this to me, like, it's not okay, and that doesn't work for me. And I think that's a huge part of what people struggle with, is because they finally find a person and they get scared that they're going to lose this person. So they actually aren't authentic in the relationship, and they don't actually behave authentically because they're just scared of just losing the person, regardless of whether that person's really the right kind of person for them or not. Because, for example, if you want to get married and have kids, but this person that you met you really like a lot, and they're like, yeah, I don't ever want to get married, I don't ever want kids, but you stay with them, you're betraying yourself all consistently throughout that relationship, right? Because you're not being true to who you are.
Yeah, and that also stems to the point of like the quote unquote alpha personality, where you have to be assertive on who you are as a person. Because usually if that trait is not being shown to a significant partner, there does become a little bit of an issue because, again, actions don't match the words and you're not looked up to as a leader to lead the rest of the relationship where it needs to go.
Right.
So, yeah, so there's that. That's definitely one of the things I definitely wanted to cover because I do read and follow up some of your posts, and you do have some very interesting insight on stuff like that. And I feel like as men, not just as men, but just like bodybuilders in general, we're so built to create this tough outer shell where we always have to be macho, we always have to be masculine, we always have to like be somewhat of like a leader, but yet we also have like a part of us that is not macho, that is not tough, that is not whatever. There's a soft part of us in every single one of us that we are, that we do lift, because there's a reason why we started to begin with, which comes back to like finding, forgot what you said, but it was more about like being able to, I can't remember. But we're not truly happy with who we are as a person, and that's what we repeat the exact same pattern over and over again. Hence the concept of always trying to get bigger and bigger, 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 stronger, stronger, and never fully be satisfied with who we are as a person, because it's a never-ending cycle, because we're never happy. If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Like I said, you end up, what I said earlier was like when you end up with some type of dysfunctional belief that somebody instilled in you, especially when you were young, like you will oftentimes go through life believing that you deserve that.
Yeah.
So until you get back to healing that particular wound that was caused by somebody else that makes you believe that you deserve that, you'll develop this cognitive bias in situations where you literally seek out things to affirm to you what it is that you believe. And that's how we end up in these repeated cycles of dysfunction in relationships and friendships and all that kind of stuff is through our cognitive biases. That it's more about we want to be more right than we are truth seekers. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned the past few years. And I mess this up all the time myself, because cognitive bias is super strong. And that it's like we have to be right. And you understand the difference. There's a difference between being right and the truth. If what is I'm trying to remember what movie that was. I want to say it was New Jack City. But it was something to the effect of if the cop thinks that the brother-in-law was the one who was the murderer, then he's going to find out that he is. And that's how we work as individuals, is that if we think this person is lying to us, then they are. We're going to find out. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't matter if they are or aren't. We're going to find out that they are. We will break down everything they say and do in a way in our mind and in our own perception that proves to us, doesn't mean it's proof, proves to us that this person's lying to us because of something that happened to us that makes us believe that everybody's going to lie to us.
Or treat us that exact same way based on the experience that we've lived.
Right. And until you can get to the root of that particular problem, you'll keep living in that repeated cycle in your life. And I write about these things a lot, and I touch on these things a lot because I grew up in a household where it was perfectly okay to have emotional expression, to be able to just, if you were upset about something, say, hey, I'm upset about this. If you were sad about something, it was okay to talk about, hey, this is, I'm sad about this. I was very lucky in that I both had, especially my mother, I was very close to my mother, and my mother was, because I was close with her, females tend to do a much better job of having that larger emotional footprint to access. So you were great. You probably have the same thing.
Yeah.
So you may have times, and I'm just taking a guess here, where you when you're talking to other males and you can see they don't kind of have that ability to tap into and express themselves maybe in the way that you can about certain things that you feel. And I find that growing up in life, it was pretty similar to that. A lot of guys who grew up in what I would consider kind of closed off of male households, where their dad was one of those really that's heavy-handed types of like, nobody cries around here, you little bitch if you cry. Nobody's upset around here. And then it doesn't allow them to be able to express themselves wholly, in a more complete way. And when you do that, you don't cultivate as much of a part about yourself, and you're not able to communicate and express all those multiple emotions that you end up feeling. and navigating through in various situations in life. So you go back to you're the hammer, you know, it's the hammer and the nail, or whatever they're saying is when you're a hammer, everything else just looks like a nail.
Yeah.
So you end up developing a very limited skill set from a communication standpoint, from an emotional standpoint. And that tends to cause, you know, you can connect with people, especially guys who've only developed that kind of limited skill set. Yeah, they can connect with people, but only on those limited skill set levels. If a guy really wants to learn how to tap into those different feelings and be able to express those, then what the main thing that he's got to get rid of in order to do that is that feeling of shame about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because the difference in guilt and shame is guilt is how we feel about something that we did, but shame is how we feel about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So when guys feel like they can't express themselves in a particular way,
because
that's
they're raised at a household that says they're not
right, where he was shamed if he did that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So there's the injury right there. There's the emotional injury that occurred that kept him from growing in those particular areas. And like I said, I'm very fortunate that I grew up with two parents who allowed that kind of full, open emotional expression in the home so that people could have that.
Yeah, for me, it was actually very tough, though. Being born in Africa and having my dad staying in Africa, never actually not coming to the U.S. to be part of the whole family. It was just me and my mom. But like you said, most of the emotions of who my mother was, she was very caring, very loving, and extremely thoughtful, and your basic feminine emotions that would usually show up when it's a female around. But at the same time, I didn't really have that support of a father figure. So those extra emotions of what it's like to be a man, I had to kind of like, I wouldn't say, I'm not sure if it's the right term, cultivate? Is that the right term?
Yeah.
I had to like cultivate that as I go throughout the years and as I got older and older, because I was very lucky to have had siblings who were about 14, 15 years younger than me. And being in that situation, I was kind of put in a situation where I had to mature and be sort of like the father figure for them. So eventually I had to adapt to kind of get between like the position of a masculine and a feminine role and being able to combine that together. Hence why I'm able to fully express who I am as a person, emotions or anything that I feel, to freely just express it. I mean, when I do stuff like that, you do get shamed for it, or you do get like, people do tend to say, oh, you're not supposed to feel like that, blah, 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 whatever. But at the same time,
I never let anybody shame me into any feelings that I had. I never let. I was on I don't know if you know who Jack Donovan is. He wrote the book The Way of Men, and he runs a huge masculinity movement. And he had me on his show, and he laughed and said, "You have a lot of feelings." And I said, "Yeah, and I don't give a shit."
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, and Jack's considered like the, you know, super masculine. And like I said, he's written multiple books on masculinity. And at the same time, like, I don't have a problem, never have had a problem. I refuse to let people shame me about that, because I'm like, look, man, I know everybody feels these things. The difference is that I just openly express that I am.
A lot more than most people would.
Right. And I never let anybody shame me. Like, I never let somebody would say something to me about it, and people have. I'm like, I don't care. Like, that's one of the things I feel like that I was blessed with in that. And I give all the glory to God, 100%, was that I never felt any shame when people do that. And I do think that's a big part of having parents who allowed me to feel secure in that development of who I was, that it's okay to feel these things, that everybody feels these things, and it's okay to express that you're going through them, that you're feeling them. And I never ever was made to feel shamed about that. And I think that's just a huge that was just a huge gift growing up, to having parents that supported that. And not everybody gets that. So it's like you said, you know, the word used, like, you don't get a chance to cultivate that in a household where if you have a father that he had a father that never allowed him to fully express himself, well, then he never cultivated those things either. And that's how we inherit the sins of our fathers, right?
Yeah.
Was that whatever it is that they will or won't allow us to become, with or without shame, is ultimately what we feel comfortable in living in.
Exactly. What's your relationship like with your sister?
We haven't spoken in a couple of decades.
Oh wow, yeah, because I noticed you talk very highly of your parents, but you did mention about your sister earlier on, but it was like slowly like fading away.
Yeah. So, um, like I said, I spent most of my teenage years trying to save her from addiction, literally pulling her out of crack houses. Um, I went through just hell on earth through most of my teenage years, dealing with that. Like I said, living in this kind of what at the time I look back now and was like this savior role where I'm trying to save her. She got pregnant. She had a little girl. Her name's Alex. She's like the most amazing. She's like 24 years old today. She's like the most amazing young lady you could ever meet in your life, which is, it's just such a testament to who she is. She has her own salon now. She opened up a business this last year and it was doing great. It's, quite clearly like this whole Corona thing has hurt everybody, but either way, I used to have to pull her out of abandoned homes when she was like 2 years old. I have like just so many horrible stories from those years from my sister. Once I got married and had kids with my wife, it just became a thing where I had this wake up call one day. I had to stop worrying about her. I had my own kid at the time. I was married. I had a family right there in front of me. And a lot of people, they have trouble with that because they feel this obligation to continue to save people that they love. And that will absolutely rob you of your life. You can't go through your life. Look, you can't save anyone. People have to learn to step up and want to save themselves. So she's, I don't know, like we just haven't spoken a couple of decades. She's tried to reach out on a few occasions, but she's never gotten clean as far as I know. She's older than me, so she's got to be like 47 by now. So she's never gotten clean as far as I know. Not for any length of time. It was in and out of prison. So it's just one of those things where you can't, I don't feel like, this is just for me personally, you don't keep people in your life after you set, that's the whole point of having boundaries, is to love yourself enough to say, listen, you bring a lot of pain and grief and emotional torture to my life, so you got to go.
Yeah, 100%. And you did say something, I'm trying to recall back to it, but it is kind of related to exactly what you just said about a few seconds ago, is, damn it, it'll come back to me. But it will come back to me eventually. So you did talk about like your family and stuff. How's the relationship with that, especially with your wife?
Ex-wife.
Oh, sorry, ex-wife. Not too good of a story. Or is it still?
Everybody knows. I've always been really open on social media about my life. Me and my wife, we were together for 20 years. We got a divorce. The last couple of years we were together, I had an affair. I've always been open about that. Yes. I was completely dedicated and monogamous for 17 years of our marriage. And then our marriage really hit the skids the last few years. We just weren't connected. There's a multitude of other issues that her and I both, we're great friends now. Like she's one of my best friends. And when I'm single, we talk all the time. If I have a girlfriend, there's boundaries there. But when we're single, we talk all the time. We support each other. I have a great relationship with her now. So we did a lot of work after we got divorced to make amends with each other, to learn how to love each other as co-parents and friends again. So we actually have a really good relationship now.
And you do have kids, right?
We have 3 girls.
Awesome. That's great. How are the relationship with the mother?
Oh, everything's great. As far as that goes, 100%. Yeah, we all went through some trials there for a few years. I think one of the things I'm probably most proud of as just a man is that after the divorce, my girls were very distraught. They were really disconnected from me for a while. I knew I didn't feel like they respected me. It took me years to win that back. And my oldest daughter didn't talk to me for 3 years. And that was really hard. She got married. I wasn't invited to the wedding. I had to work so hard with all 3 of them, with the moments that I did have, to earn their forgiveness, their love back, their respect, everything. And now my relationship with them is the best it's ever been. I mean, it's just, I couldn't ask for more.
And this brings me to the one question is, due to the divorce rate and kids having father figure being missed from their life, or mother figure being missed from their life, what ramifications do you think that has on a child who wants to, there's a divorce?
That was something I actually looked, because I'm a person who looks a lot at stats, everything from like lifting and just life and that kind of stuff. And as long as basically there's this belief that kids who come from divorced families are just going to be messed up forever, and it's just not true. If you actually go look at the current body of research, and that is the kids who come from parents where the parents divorced but have a good co-parenting relationship, basically turn out just the same as far as functionality in society and those kind of things as parent or kids come from. Look, there's plenty of people who stay married and have dog shit marriages, and that messes their kids up. I would rather people, even as a Christian, I would say I would rather people get divorced, right, and have a good co-parenting relationship and show their kids that, don't stay, in a relationship where there's either infidelity or there's lying, or there's not love, there's not connection. I believe that you should wake up every day and choose your person and love them 100%. Don't get married if you're not going to make that kind of commitment, right?
Yeah.
But if otherwise, I tell people, look, kids that come from divorce, my kids are all doing amazing.
Well, that's they had the whole idea.
There's lots of kids that come out of where the parents are still together, but the marriage was so dysfunctional it messes them up too. Because we all have what I was talking about earlier. We all have an attachment type, and we learn the framework of how we see love and intimacy and connection and relationships. We learn that from observing our parents. We've learned that from those relationships. That's what builds the framework of how we see those things. So if there's dysfunctionality in those relationships, we will go into our adulthood with working from that subconscious framework. Right.
Yeah. I asked because during my dating experiences, I have noticed, maybe I'm just being subjectively biased, but I have noticed that women who tend to have a good relationship with their mother tends to be kind of like their mom, per se. They're a lot more respectful. They have more values to hold to them, versus women who tend to struggle back and forth with their mother. There is a lot of underlying issue, which goes back to like whatever it is you had prior based on your parents. It does cultivate to something else. When you were younger, specifically dated, did you ever, I'm assuming people don't really think about that, but did you ever encounter yourself in a situation where a woman has not the best relationship with their mother and they were a little bit interesting?
I dated, I didn't date a lot. Like when I started dating this one girl when I was 15, when I was talking about, she's like the prettiest girl in like, I don't know, like the whole county. I started dating her, and she had a good relationship with her mother. We dated for 3 years, broke up. And then probably I dated on and off just some girls here and there. And then I met my wife maybe like a year later. So I didn't really, I did date one girl who had a pretty tumultuous relationship with her mother. We only dated for a few months, and her mother was like, she was a Hellcat. Like she was, to this day, she was like hell on wheels. So yeah, they had a pretty tumultuous relationship, but we didn't date long enough that I could speak from any type of personal experience as to that. Clearly, she had a bad temper. She had a really bad temper. That was for sure. So, my former wife had a good relationship with her mother, but it wasn't volatile, but I would say it was definitely rocky at times. One of the things I think is, with you mentioning that, because I have 3 daughters, I do think that women do tend to, just in general, be a little bit more catty and competitive with one another. And that even goes to mother and daughter. And I think a lot of that sometimes comes back to a daughter trying to establish sort of her autonomy and her degree of independence within that particular relationship, maybe at an earlier age than mom is willing to kind of let the reins off of.
Because based on mom's experience, mom had an experience where like she had that exact same thing.
Right. It's the same, right? Like, so mom like remembers growing up and being like wild as shit and doing stuff that she regrets. So she's tried to protect her daughter from the exact same, right, from the same thing. So what she does is she doubles down on the disciplinary stuff and that kind of stuff. And then of course the daughter rebels against that. That's the traditional cycle, right? Is, you know, until you get older, you look back and go, oh wow, it's really stupid. My parents were just trying to look out for me. So that cycle keeps getting repeated over and over again, right?
Yeah. Having 2 sisters, 2 brothers, all below the age of 12, I've noticed one thing that is completely different as a young adult growing up was that you should not be teaching your kids. Give me a second. I'm going to keep it a lot simpler. So when it comes to kids, instead of like being authoritative, you should always show love, respect, and be very caring towards them as an individual, because they, like we were talking about, they base all those things that when they do get older, if you show those exact same things towards them as they're growing up, they cultivate that, and eventually that is what they become. But if you're showing like authoritative, like command over them, you're being a little bit too strict, you're doing all this stuff, and you're not making them feel welcome or being part of the family, it does tend to become a problem later on where all of a sudden you guys are now both fighting against each other back and forth.
Well, one of the things that we desire as as part of the human condition is that a particular degree of autonomy and mixed in conjunction with a particular degree of security. So we depend on our parents at a young age for that. So even as young as like 2-year-olds, like a 2-year-old sit in a high chair and you go to feed them, right, and they'll push the spoon away and be like, no. And then what they're doing in that moment is actually trying to establish their independence and autonomy. It's like, hey, I don't need you to feed me. Like, I am a human being. But then when you take the food away, they start crying for it, right? Because they want to be fed. That's the security aspect. We go through that for the rest of our lives, where we are in this mix of, we want to be able to do what we want to do as individuals, but we want to feel secure in the process of doing it. So teenagers, especially, you get a teenage girl or even with teenage boys, and you want to be able to express who you are and feel that freedom in that expression of, hey, this is who I am. I don't want anybody to hold me down or whatever. But at the same time, you're like, oh, make sure I have a place to live and I have some money in my pocket and that I have, gas in my car or whatever. So there's that security aspect, right? It's that double-edged sword. We go through that even through the rest of our life, is that the same thing. We become adults and we want to be in relationships, and we want to be able to continue to grow and be who we are and nurture that sense of self that we have in us. But at the same time, if we were with a partner, we want that interdependency where we're both growing and becoming who it is that we want to become, and we have a vision and we have the longitudinal expression of this complete person that we kind of see, that you never arrive at, but you kind of feel like you can get there. But at the same time, you want to always feel like that you have the ability to depend on your partner emotionally, and that you have that security in that space. So we go through that. That's where we find that balance. And when that balance is out of whack, that's when we tend to feel out of whack. So you take the teenager that can't fully express themselves. They don't feel like they have autonomy. They don't feel like they have this ability to have a strong sense of self and express that strong sense of self, because they have a helicopter parent who's telling them who they can be and who they can't be, where they can go and what they can't do. That person rebels because so badly they just want to be able to express themselves in a very unique and independent way. And that's where the rebellion comes from. And like I said, at the same time, you still want the security. So we end up struggling a bit with that balance really most throughout the rest of our lives, until we come to that more, you asked earlier, where do you shed that need, right? Where do you shed that need for this or that? And I think that comes back as you start arriving at a more place of wholeness, completeness, and self-identification of who you are, what you are really about, what you do want in your life, what you don't want in your life. And as you start kind of filtering these things out along the way, you kind of start shedding some of those things that you thought that you used to need, right? You start realizing, okay, there's some things that are more important in there.
Yeah.
And so as you start arriving a little bit more in those places, then you don't feel like that you have to rebel, to be this person, and you don't seek out those relationships. Then you start kind of arriving at a place of more internal peace about who you are, until you hit some other seasons in your life that bring out some stuff in you, and you're like, oh, there's some stuff I didn't know about me that I just realized, and there's some other places I need to grow, and there's some other wounds that I have I didn't realize. And there's this other thing that happened to me when I was older that, in this particular broken relationship, that I've been repeating that particular cycle. So I think you don't ever really arrive there at a sense of completeness, but as you get closer, you start shedding some of those particular insecurities that you knew that you had years before.
And you start creating a whole self-awareness of who you are as an individual.
Definitely, as you start arriving at self-awareness, more self-awareness, when you start arriving at a higher degree of consciousness, it's kind of a painful thing, right? Because you start realizing all
your flaws, and then now you're like, how do I get this to be better?
Right. Well, not only that, but then it's like, ooh, like I had these really shitty things that I did a lot.
Yeah.
And then you can even become aware of those shitty things. Like I said, I just did even just recently, and you become aware of those shitty things, but you still get flooded emotionally, and it pushes you emotionally off center. And you go back to repeating those dysfunctional patterns. You're like, wow, I thought I was past this shit.
Mm-hmm.
And that is another wake up call. You're like, there's still some more work that I got to do. There's still some more healing that has to happen.
Mm-hmm. And that's where it comes with lifting for most people. Is more of like destroying yourself and then repairing yourself and then getting stronger and adapting to whatever stress it is that you're facing over time to get you better to where you need to be.
Right. That metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, metaphorically speaking, of course.
Right.
But
yeah, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, in a sense, that's kind of how I look at it in terms of lifting. And like, even when I do tell people who are trying to like put on muscle size and trying to gain strength and whatever, or lose weight, I do tell them this one simple thing that I think it makes sense. They might not, but working out is kind of your adapting to stress, whether that be through progressive overload, and then you're repeating that exact same process. But every time that you do get to a certain point, you get better and better. But no matter what it is, it's the same thing with life. You're always going to have setbacks. You just have to get better and adapt to those setbacks, and eventually there's going to be more and more and then stuff like that. But eventually you end up becoming who you end up realizing who you are as a person, and that creates that self-awareness and that self-conscious that we were talking about earlier. And then from that point on, people started realizing, like, I have all this flaw, I have all these issues, I have all these things I have to fix. How do I get better? What do I have to do to get to where I need to be, where I'm satisfied and I'm happy with who I am as a person? And I did mention back with like lifting wise is that people do tend to get to that never ending cycle of never feeling fully satisfied and happy with their progress, their results. And if they're not fully satisfied and happy with their life, with their results in the gym, if you're that much into it, you'll never be satisfied and happy with your life outside of the gym. And
yeah, and I think what you're definitely getting at there, and I agree with you on, is that there's something internally that this person is suffering with that doesn't make them feel good enough about who they are, that they're consistently chasing this external goal and how they look and how lean they are, how big they are, however, what it is, because that's the only thing they have found as a coping mechanism to find a way to temporarily. It's like emotionally eating, right?
Yeah.
It's like people who are emotional eaters. And there's times where I'm an emotional eater, but when you're emotionally eating, it's because just in that moment, you're just band-aiding that bullshit that you're dealing with, right? You're just like, man, I don't want to feel this right now. And eating these 4 large peaches feels really good. It makes me not think about it. And the thing is like, but it's so temporary. Literally, it's just, you're just enjoying yourself for just the 30 minutes or an hour, whatever it is you're eating.
It's like eating during prep.
Right. And like, right, during prep, like you look the best you look for one day.
Yeah.
Right? Like you work for all those months to look that good for one day. And then, then you like afterwards, if you're not smart, you sabotage that shit in a matter of weeks. But I think people consistently, it's like those people who have to have they've had like hundreds of thousands of dollars of plastic surgery. It's they're consistently band-aiding this internal wound with something that they can control externally. And that is usually their self, right? Their body, their diet, their, their lifting, their running. People do it with people have unhealthy relationships with exercise all the time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right? Oh, 100%. I call them stimulus junkies, right? Like, just like the guys who just get the women, I think, often are worse about that than men. I think men actually are a little bit less connected in with that, but women, I definitely just anecdotally, I've seen are far more prone to become stimulus junkies.
Well, it's exercise. Oh, sorry. It's not just that. It's just I've come to the conclusion that most women base their self-worth, not all, but majority tend to base their self-worth on how they look on a physical perspective. And if they don't feel that they look in a certain way, it does go into like eating disorder.
But the thing about that is we have cultivated and created that, like, we have done that as a society to women where they feel like that they're most their commodity, that's their most worthy commodity, is what they look like.
Yeah.
So like we created that as a society across the board. Like, we do that, right? Like hell, right now I'm running who's hotter, on my Facebook, but I'm doing men and women, but women especially, is that they come to the belief that their most expensive commodity is what they look like, right? And we do that as a society. We elevate women, especially beautiful women. We elevate them. You can go look at the statistics on it, that more beautiful women, they get raises, they get better raises, better promotions. They get breaks in life that women who are not as beautiful as they are, they never get, right? So we create that particular standard by consistently placing beauty upon this pedestal, and it's something literally you're just born with. You're just lucky enough to be born with, because of your mom and dad. It's too big. Like, it's been that way literally since the beginning of time, and it's never going to change. But I'm saying, like, the reason why that women place so much their sense of self-worth is because
we as a society
they grow up in a society that teaches them that, right? But like, if you're really beautiful, then we'll love you, we'll respect you, you'll get raises, you'll get money, you'll get breaks that other people don't get. So we tell women, and we show women, we've talked about actions and words earlier being congruent, we consistently show them that they can trust in that belief, that if they're really beautiful, they look good, they're going to get attention from men, that they're going to get all these other things. The problem with that is we're all going to get old. We're all going to get uglier. Our bodies aren't going to look as good as they used to. And all those things are going to happen. And then you start hitting those stages. And that's one of the things, even now, like maybe about 45, is like, I want to have a person to grow old with. Like, I want to get married again someday and be a great husband to somebody. I don't want to get married for the sake of getting married. I want to find the right woman to get married to. But we're going to grow old one day. I want to be able to look back and look at, whoever it is that's sitting out on me in the rocking chair across from me on the porch, and still think that she's unbelievably beautiful. And I'm glad that I got to spend the second half of my life with her.
We'll be like, hey, honey, remember that first time when we met? And then you just like rock on your chair. It's like,
right.
Get down.
In the end, man, it's all the little things are all the big things by the end. They really are.
It's, I think going back to the idea of like, I think I was saying like, what makes me happy in terms of a relationship, it really is all just the little things.
100%.
It's never just like something that's like so grandiose to the point where I have to like look up to that. Like, in terms of like, when you did mention you do gifts and stuff like that, again, I was raised in a household where I don't really know what gifts were, because my mom never had the chance to like give out gifts. So growing up, growing up, I kind of just never really got into the idea of gifts themselves, which is why, like, when I do have, like, let's say Christmas, instead of getting like a shitload of money and stuff like that, I'd rather just go somewhere where there's like a memorable thing to remember afterwards than just getting all that money and all that gifts. Because usually 9 out of 10, I usually just lose it. Like, I don't know, I like misplace it, and I'm just like, because I don't care that much about the value of it.
I don't know if you ever saw the movie Say Anything. It's one of my favorites. It's got John Cusack in it. But if you haven't, you need to go watch it. It's an all-time classic. But the little things end up being the big things. He's with this girl it's like his dream date girl, and they're walking across the 7-Eleven parking lot, and she doesn't notice that there's a broken bottle on in the parking lot. She's about to step in, and he goes, "Oh, watch yourself. There's some broken glass right there." And he just kind of kicks it out of the way. You come to find out later in the movie, that was like a really impactful moment for her. It was just a little thing, right? Like him just caring enough to notice there was broken glass and she wasn't going to step in it, and cut her foot.
Yeah.
But it's those little things you think about, is because what it is, the little things mean that you've been paying attention to your significant other without them asking you to notice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a truly impactful thing, right? Like if you're with a girl and she's like, "Hey, I picked you up because I remember that one time that you said you liked whatever." It's always such a big deal because you're like, "Wow, you remember that?"
Like you remember.
Right.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is women do tend to respond a lot better with the little things, because for them they're more.
But they're big things. But those little things are big things.
That's also very true as well.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of like remembering for you to do the dishes, that's also a little thing.
Yeah, if you get married, I tell you this from experience, you get married doing, and I think you can look this up in studies too, but I don't need a study to know this. If you clean the house, you do the dishes and wash the laundry and do all that kind of stuff, your wife is absolutely gonna bang your brains out.
Oh yeah,
because she's going to feel more rested. She's going to feel appreciated. She's going to feel like that she's got a connected partner. Those things go a long ways.
Yeah, it all goes back to the concept of society, where we've always just taught. We say like women are based on how beautiful they are, but with women as well, it also comes like we always tell them, hey, they're used to cleaning and stuff like that. But when a guy take the moment and time to do that himself, it shows a bigger picture and how much appreciated they are towards when a man does that.
Right. And like I said, plus she'll be rested. She's generally, when you're really tired, you want to have sex. Right. So that especially goes true for women. You get a woman who's got little kids, it's exhausted all the time, and that's trying to like keep a house clean or cook the meals or whatever. When is she going to have the energy to have sex? So yeah, I tell for guys that are married, I'm like, man, just don't worry about like whose quote unquote job it is to do whatever. Just help and just clean the house, take the garbage out, like wash clothes, like, do all the stuff you think. Like I learned how to do all that stuff after I got divorced. I was like, man, me and my former wife got to talk about that now because I can clean like nobody's business. I learned how to do all that after I became single. But if, those are things that will actually enrich your relationship with your lady, man, is learning how to do all that kind of stuff and doing that with her. I had a guy that I helped out with. He was in a pretty bad relationship, and I was explaining to him the concept of bids and what a bid is. And I learned this from John Gottman. He's like the Michael Jordan of relationships. A bid is if let's say your partner's into crossword puzzles and they're like, hey, what's a 4-letter word for whatever? And that's a bid. Your partner is asking you to be interested in something they're interested in. Mm-hmm. So an inwards turn is for you to get involved in that with them, to say, let me think, what is a 4-letter word for whatever? That's called an inward turn. That helps build the relationship in a positive aspect. Mm-hmm. An outwards bid, it'd be like, I don't know, who cares? That's you showing I'm not interested in what you're interested in. Yeah. So I had a guy, and his relationship was on the rocks, and he didn't understand. They were fighting all the time, and it got to the core of she owned a salon, and I'm like, does she try to show you her work? He's like, yeah, every day she comes in, she tries to show me these hairstyles they do. And he's like, but I don't know anything about them, so I just like don't pay attention. I'm like, wow.
That's like literally admitting that you don't listen.
Like so every day she's coming, think about this, every day she's coming home, he's rejecting her over and over and over and over. And then he's wondering why their relationship sucks. So I'm like, dude, just go learn everything you can about what she does and those hairstyles and get involved and intrigued in that and watch what happens. Like calls me like a couple months later. He's like, holy shit. It's like we're like in a totally different relationship now. Yeah. That one thing just had to get interested in the bid she was giving. And I always tell guys, I'm like, are you turning into the bids that your woman is consistently giving? And if you're turning out to it more than you're turning in, your relationship's probably not gonna last.
And that's why when it comes to like having a partner and just relationship in general, listening is key.
Comprehension is key.
That too, and then
comprehension is key. You can communicate till the cows come home, but if you don't really fully take a moment to comprehend what this other person is getting at, what they're trying to express, and look, I'm I have my moments where I fall too. I've had plenty of women that are like, you do not understand what I'm trying to express to you. And I'm like, then help me. And it's okay. Like in that moment, like I know it's a guy, cause we want to feel like we're just everything in the world for the woman that we love. Right. But it's okay to say, I don't understand right now, but I want to. Like, put your ego aside and say, listen, I don't understand what you're coming at me with right now, but I want to know. I want to be able to understand. So just ask questions. Like, that's okay. Like, as guys, we're consistently in this mode of, I'm going to fix you. I'm going to fix this. Here's your solution. And more times than not, when a woman is coming at you, she either already knows the solution and she just wants you to be in that moment with her and for her to feel like you understand her pain. That is one of the biggest disconnects guys have with women is a woman comes to you and says, oh, this and that, whatever. And then you're like, well, why don't you do blah, blah, blah? And she's frustrated now because she's like, I just want you to feel like that you can sit in this moment of agony or distress or, despair that I have and that you're with me in it and that you are making an effort to understand my pain. I don't need you to fix my shit. And when you tell a guy that, I've got another friend's like, I ain't going to do that. I'm a man. I'm like, well, this is why your relationship's fucked up. I'm like, because you think you cannot apply logic in those situations. You have to be able to say, I'm going to sit with you in this that you're feeling right now and let you know that you're not alone in that. But if you're just trying to give her a solution to her problem, then she's put off by it because she's like, it goes back in the Bible in the book of Job when, I don't know if you've read.
I've had some experiences with it when I was younger.
Okay. So in the book of Job, like God allows Satan to like punish Job, like without mercy. Like he just can't kill him, right? And Job is so mad because he's covered in sores and he's just like he's in it, he's just in a ton of pain, right?
Yeah.
And Satan is literally torturing him daily. And his friends come to him and they're offering up all these remedies and different things, and all Job wanted was some sympathy for his pain. Yeah. He was so mad because like you just can't offer me some words of sympathy in this moment. And I remember thinking. Because I actually just read the book of Job again like a few weeks ago, and I remember thinking like that is so common when we're in pain. There's a lot of times we just want somebody to say the right words to make us feel like we're not alone in that suffering, right? And there's a lot of times where it's like women especially are more expressive about that, and they're like, hey, I'm really suffering. I'm having this kind of day, and these things are going on. And to say, listen, like, I'm sorry that you're going through those things right now. I just want you to know I love you. I'm here for you. Whatever it is that you need, like, I got you. I'm with you through this, And just sometimes hearing that and say, the identification of, yep, that I remember that happened to me. It's terrible, so forth and so on. Anything, but instead of just going, why don't you do blah, blah, blah? Because that just tends to frustrate people. Right? I'm sure there's been moments in time where you were struggling something emotionally and you're like, you're not necessarily looking for a solution. You're just looking for a way to express that sorrow that you're dealing with.
And have that person be able to sympathize with me.
100%, right?
Yeah. All the time.
Right. All the time, right? All the time. I think that we all want that sense of connection that we have when we're in grief, right? That we talk to somebody. What makes us feel better is that we feel heard in talking to them, that we feel like, yes, I expressed my grief and this person, and they were aware of it and acknowledged it. And there was a connection there about that grief. Whereas they just say, well, just don't blah, 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 or just do this, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, wow, you're not even acknowledging that I'm in pain right now at this moment.
Yeah.
Right. That's
and you're never like solving their problem. Like usually,
I'm not algebra. I'm not a math equation. My problem isn't something to be solved. I'm a human being. Like, identify with my human condition right now.
And then just being able to sympathize with it, because when you do, they can kind of understand. Like, okay, you guys are in the same boat, and they can just be like, I feel so much better.
Right. And what the one of the key things that allows us to develop empathy is our own suffering and our own loss, right? That's how you arrive. Like, how else do you find identification? Because when somebody comes to you and they're expressing to you about this sense of grief and you've experienced something, you have identification with that. The reason why you can have empathy is because you know how that felt, right?
Yeah.
The reason why you can have empathy for them in that moment and you're like, wow, my heart hurts for you right now, is because you felt that before. So the way that we end up developing empathy throughout our life is through our own losses, through our own trials, through our own suffering, that our own ability to persevere through those things the manifestation of that on the other side is that we usually develop this tremendous amount of empathy, especially when we come across another person that is going through such a valley. And we say, wow, I've been in that valley. I've been in those dark waters before. I know what you're going through. My heart hurts for you right now. Like, that's how we end up developing that empathy.
And that is 100% correct. This has actually been very informative and super interesting. Initially, I did want to get a little bit into the whole lifting, which we did at the first, and then family issues and like relationships growing up and stuff like that. But the meat and potato of everything was exactly what we just talked about, which is like literally the entire part of this is being able to like, again, like relationships, being able to sympathize, empathize with people and understand where people are coming from. Because now maybe I'm just judging and just being a little bit biased, but in today's world, a lot of people do seem to lack stuff like that because they're just so insensitive to everything else that's going on.
I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think that we have become, we don't know what we're supposed to pay attention to anymore, because from day to day, especially before, right now, it's just coronavirus, right? But before the coronavirus thing came along, like we had the attention spans of gnats due to social media and
like
the internet.
Every week, there was something new going on. We changed from one thing to the next.
Everybody, we don't know. We don't have 5 minutes to care about something before there's another crisis that everybody's telling us we got to care more about that now. So we've become so, this is not the world we're meant to live in. We have so many different supernormal stimuluses, everything from porn to the internet or whatever. And it numbs us down to average connection to what we're supposed to be stimulated by. And the other part about that is social media has made us a dopamine addicted machines, because we get those micro dopamine hits for every time we get a bunch of likes or we get a bunch of validation or attention about how amazing we are. And that has made us, to some degree, more inward, I think, than we're all even happy with, right? Because I think at our core, what we desire truthfully the most is that sense of unconditional love with another person as a pair bonding species. But then we're carrying around this big old bag of conditions with us, right? We have this big old bag of conditions that we carry around that, if you want love from me, then you got to meet all these particular conditions. And then we don't know how to love in a way like we've never been truly hurt, because we've all hurt to our core. And what we learn how to do is love in a very hesitant fashion. So what happens is we become more inward, we become more self-focused, we become more we're stuck in the emotional survival mode. We don't want somebody to hurt us. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be authentic and transparent and all those things. So we live in this more inward state where, well, this person did this to me and I know you're going to do that to me too. And so then the cognitive bias kicks back in and we start reliving those old patterns. And that's where we end up living in that inward self rather than in our true self, and learning that, hey, I can live without expectations. I can love another person first, and I can love the most. And I can love without expectations that, hey, if I give this person something, I don't have to get something back. I'm doing it because I want to give. But I don't feel like that we're cultivating that in our society right now, and I don't feel like that we're cultivating that in relationships anymore, for sure.
And like you said, with the idea of having social media and that little micro dopamine release, we're never fully happy because there's so many options available out there. And if something's going off in our relationship or just like in our lives, we can just go challenge that off what we see on social media through likes, through porn, through something to help fill that specific hole that we're missing.
Back in the 1950s, man, if you grew up in the middle of like Wyoming or whatever, you met one girl, you had to make that shit work with her.
Yeah. Nowadays, if you don't, there's always someone right around the corner on social media.
Right at your fingertips. And like I said, we're not meant to function that way, which is why I think we have more dysfunctional patterns, or we have more dysfunctional relationships. Why more people find this struggle to connect. People have literally been minimized down to a swipe left or swipe right in terms of their value at this point in this society. When we're not meant to be this way.
Yeah, and it sucks. It really does.
It can suck. You have to. It's kind of like Gandhi said: be the change you want to see in the world. So if you think it's the suck, try not to be the suck.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that if you just wake up and aspire that I am going to absolutely live in my truth, I'm going to ask for my needs. And if this person, can't meet my needs, can't respect my boundaries, can't show up for me, then they're just not for me. And you will whittle it down over time. There will be fewer and fewer people who are like, yeah, I'm going to show up like that for you too. And I want you to show up like this for me. And you're like, okay, absolutely. And there you go, boom. You're like, I'm glad I made it through all those people, that I finally arrived at this person who's like, I am all about you.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that's the Grant study by Harvard, which has been over 75 years. They actually proved this. So the longest study ever done basically on the human condition. And it's that at the end of the 75 years of research, basically the relationships that you have in your life create the quality of life that you ended up living. 100%. So it's like the quality of your life is directly related to the amount of love that you had in those relationships.
Sounds like you're quoting Corey Wayne.
Say what?
I said, sounds like you're quoting Corey Wayne.
Oh, I don't even know who that is.
Oh, he's like a relationship expert, and that is exactly what he said. It's nearly almost word for word.
Okay, that's great. That's true. The Grant study did this. Like, quality of your life is going to be determined by the amount of love that you have in the relationships that you develop over your life. It's pretty much that simple.
Yeah, it is. But like we said earlier, people like to complicate things.
I think we can complicate things more when we're dictated. We allow how we feel to dictate our dysfunction.
Mm-hmm. And that is very true. All right, this has been really, really great and a very eye opener. To finish it off, what are some advice? Well, this entire thing has been a learning lesson, but if you were to give an advice to the audience out there who are going to potentially watch this till the very end, what would you give them?
Oh, that it depends on a lot of that. Really does. It depends on what stage of life that you're in. But I think the biggest piece of advice that you say, just like, here's this blanket advice. And the number one is probably you have to understand the first step in committing to what it is that you believe that you deserve is walking away from things that aren't meant for you. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the hardest parts about life sometimes is, like I was talking about earlier, so we get in relationships and we know this relationship is not meant for us, but we have trouble walking away from it. But the whole time we'll scream, what we deserve. Well, if you believe that you deserve X, Y, and Z, but you're staying in A, B, and C, then you don't deserve X, Y, and Z. So for people out there who say, this is the life that I want, this is the relationship that I want, this is the job that I want, this is the income level that I want, this is the house that I want, this is whatever I want, ask yourself what choices that you're making each and every day that are helping to bring those things to fruition. Because the first step in committing to what it is that you believe you deserve is detaching from the things that keep you from getting what you believe you deserve. You want a better relationship than you have right now. But if you're staying in a relationship, that you don't have alignment with this person, you don't have passion with this person, you're not allowing yourself to live in your own truth in this relationship. And you say, well, I want a relationship where I deserve a relationship where I have a good love and have connection and have all these things. But I'm like, you're staying in one that doesn't give you that. So your first step in committing to what it is that you believe you deserve is walking away from the things that pretty much by that ethos, and it'll be difficult to go wrong as long as you have some type of moral compass.
And that's perfect. That is good.